I'm Mary Lyons, and I am the Wealth Woman.
And I'm Eric Alexander from Benchmark Income Group.
And this is the Big Wealth Podcast.
Everything you've ever been taught about money is wrong.
But don't worry, we're here to help.
On this podcast, we'll use the same tools you already know to actually help set you free.
Free to do what you want with your time, with your money, and with your energy. Free to live your life the way you have dreamt about.
So we're going to talk about wealth knowledge, personal reflections, and the financial industry news of the day.
Welcome to the Big Wealth Podcast. And we are excited for this talk today. Oftentimes the analogy that I use when it comes to talking about retirement is like walking through a minefield. People have this beautiful vision that it's all going to be easy and rosy and wonderful, but the reality is that there are problems that people face as they are trying to retire. And when I think about that minefield, if I'm walking through a minefield and there are mines everywhere and I don't know where they are, there is a high likelihood that I am going to accidentally step on one of those mines, and that blows everything up. But what I also find is if there is something as simple as a map that tells me where all those mines are, it's very easy for me to avoid them. So Eric, when you think about the minefields that people are going to face or the mines they're going to face as they try and retire, what would you say is one of the larger problems that people experience?
Yeah, well, I think there's actually two. I think because there's never just one answer, right? I think there's two big. It just depends. I think there's two big challenges that we face. One is I don't know how long that minefield is going to be. If I don't have the map, I don't know if I'm walking in that minefield for 5 minutes or for 5 years, right? So I think one of the big challenges we see is, am I going to die at 80? And this is a really morbid conversation. Am I dying at 80, at 90, 120? How long do I have to have? How long am I going to be in retirement?
Yeah.
And I think that's the one big one.
When do you graduate from the planet? I don't know the answer to that. I'm not omniscient.
Right. And the second challenge I think we see a lot of times is there's a really unrealistic expectation of how much money that person can actually pull from their investments and live on. Hey, I've got $1 million. It seems like a lot of money. Surely I can pull out $200K to go live on for the rest of my life and we get no problems.
So I can't solve the longevity issue. That's outside my pay grade, but I do think we can have a really good discussion about safe withdrawal rates in retirement.
Right. No doubt. Well, there's a joke in the industry that there's two kinds of actuaries that people deal with. There's regular actuaries that can tell you how many people will die every year. And then there's the Sicilian actuary that tells you which of those people will die. And so neither of those problems we solve.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about safe withdrawal rates.
Sure.
There's some industry accepted standards, but I think it's important that people, that consumers understand how advisors come up with their recommendations. So if it's okay with you, what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about Monte Carlo simulations for a second.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I know everyone who's not interested in finance is just groaned because they know here it comes, but I'm going to do my best to make this entertaining. And I'm actually going to steal the story that my dad told me when I was a teenager to help me understand what Monte Carlo simulations are. So these are really the analysis that we're going to do to figure out what can you safely withdraw when you don't know what's going to happen in the market. So everybody knows that the market is volatile, right? It goes up, it goes down, it moves all around, and you don't know when you're going to get a particular sequence. So what a Monte Carlo simulation does is it allows us to randomize rates of return. So I want you to picture, if you've ever watched someone draw the lottery on TV, they have that big glass, I don't know, it's not really a vase. I don't want to call it a cage, but it's a big glass container.
The box.
Yeah, that's sitting there, and there's a beautiful woman next to it, and there's a bunch of ping pong balls in this machine, and there's air blowing through it, so they're popping all around. So I just want you to envision that. And let's say that in this day and age that we ship one of those to you in a big giant Amazon box, and you open it up, and you're like, oh, this is interesting. You take it in, and you open the next box, and it's a bunch of ping pong balls, more than 100 ping pong balls. And then you get to the next box, it's a giant box, but the only thing it has in it is a tiny little Sharpie marker. And so you're like, what am I supposed to do with this? And you're like, all right, well, we're going to do an experiment. So you get on the interwebs, right? You get on the internet and you turn on Google. Like I sound like an old person even saying this, right? But you get on Google and you're going to search for the history of the stock market year by year returns. So what happened each year in the stock market from the very beginning through the end of last year. And so what happens is you look at the first year and you take one of those ping pong balls, and with your Sharpie marker, you're going to rate that rate of return onto that ball. And then you're going to stick it into that big glass machine. And then you're going to look at year 2, write that on a Sharpie ball, stick it into the machine, year 3, and you keep doing that until you have more than 100 ping pong balls sitting in this machine. Right. So now you turn it on and the air goes through there and they get completely randomized. And we can push the button and we can tell it to spit out 35 ping pong balls, right? So this is going to take us from 65 when we retire all the way to age 100. And we'll talk about why 100 maybe a little bit later in this episode, but a full lifetime, right? So if we map that out, and let's say for the sake of argument that it's all really good returns, there's no losses in this first result. Everything is up and to the right. It looks beautiful. You take those ping pong balls, you stick them back into the machine, and you push the button again. Do you get the same sequence or a different sequence?
Right. Every time it's different, right?
It's different, right?
It's randomized.
It's random. So if we take that and we do that over and over and over again, maybe hundreds of thousands of times, we can map out every possible sequence of returns that could have occurred given what the market did. That's usable data, right? So if we take that and we stick it into a computer, we can then ask the question, if I was withdrawing 10% every single year, what is the likelihood that I would make it all the way to age 100 and still have money in my portfolio? And I think advisors typically make a mistake here because they don't always understand, or they don't share with the client that this is not, I started with $1 million. What's the likelihood I still have $1 million after 35 years? This is just the likelihood that there is a positive balance in the account, right?
Right.
So
and
that's it. That's a Monte Carlo simulation.
Yeah. And the funny part of that, or the interesting part of that experiment, is there's no points for running out. There's no points for having just almost enough money, just a few more days left in your birthday before you ran out of cash, kind of thing. So it's the money's got to last the whole time, right?
It's all or nothing. It's got to be there. So when you think about that data and you look at the conclusions, the first time that type of simulation was done, I think, was in the 90s. There were some professors at Trinity University, and they produced something called the Trinity Report. And if I remember correctly, their conclusion as they ran this Monte Carlo simulation really for the first time was that the safe withdrawal rate was somewhere between 4 and 6%. And based on the research that they had done, I believe they won a Nobel Prize for that research. But there's been a lot more time that has passed since the 90s with radically different market conditions. And so what we find is if we add in that new data, what has actually happened to the assumptions for safe withdrawal rates?
Right, they've gone down. And that's the interesting part is, and I think the guys that did that study, I don't know if they recanted it or said, hey, we overshot it by just a little bit, because if you took that snapshot in the 90s, that's tech boom, that's all the rest of the stuff kind of leading up to the end of the century. And then you had really that lost decade. You had kind of 2000 to 2010, where the market was basically flat. I mean, there wasn't much going on over that time period. And so it really adjusted what that Monte Carlo simulation did, which was really fascinating.
And there were some wildly bad years in there too, because you can't forget that time period from kind of mid 2007 through mid 2009, where we saw pretty fantastic, I don't know, but maybe that's the wrong word, but losses. And then when you think about what's happened since then, we've been in a historically low interest rate environment for a long time. And so there's an impact there as well, because when you start running these simulations, what is fascinating to me, maybe not to everyone, but to me, is that on one side, if you build a very aggressive portfolio, yes, you have the potential for really high yield, but you also have the potential for major losses. And when you take a major loss and you're in retirement, you're also withdrawing money. So you're selling when you're low, which we all know That's not good advice, right? And then as your portfolio is trying to recover, if you're continuing to withdraw through that recovery, you're really crippling your portfolio's ability to get back to whatever your starting balance was. And that creates a lot of danger. And so sometimes when people are saying, well, the stock market has averaged a certain percentage over time, why can't I withdraw that? It's because they're not taking into account the fact that, you know, if your portfolio takes a loss and you compound it with a withdrawal, even when it tries to recover, if you're continuing to withdraw that recovery, it's almost impossible for you to maintain that for a long duration. So what happens if you say, okay, well, if volatility is clearly a problem, right? There's a reason that most people don't just stay invested straight in the S&P 500 through retirement.
Right.
What happens if you go to the other extreme?
Well, yeah, that's the challenge, right? That's the double-edged sword of the whole thing is volatility is bad. We don't need rate of return. We just need steady. So I sacrifice some of my equity portfolio for more fixed income, right? I want to go more bond heavy, maybe an 80-20 portfolio or even 100% bonds. So you've effectively eliminated a lot of the volatility, but you also eliminated the yield at the same time. You eliminated the gas that got you there, right? So whenever they reran that scenario, they reran that study and they did it again with a more heavy bond portfolio versus heavy equity. They found out that it was still about 3% because that was about as much as you could yield safely without having a higher degree that you're going to run out. And one of the things they found is that once you started getting above 3.5%, 4.5% distribution rates, then the volatility wasn't there, but the yield couldn't support that level of pull.
Right.
And so it was this pure, like old school double-edged sword of you're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. And it's a hard challenge.
So we've talked about the two extremes at this point, right?
Right.
Straight up just in the market, pure equity, and then straight up, we're just looking at bonds, right? And what we find is that at those two extremes, if you would like, and I'm gonna use math from some simulations that we have the data for here. If you're looking at 30 years that the money needs to produce income, and you want a greater than 90% chance that you make it all the way through retirement, you're really stuck right at about that 3% withdrawal rate, right? So, then it begs the question. We spend a lot of time as advisors talking about diversification, right? That's on everyone's mind. It's the buzzword for our industry, I think. So what happens if you move more towards the middle and start diversifying a portfolio? Does that change what you get to spend?
Sure, it improves your likelihood. So the idea in that study was if you want a 90 to 95% chance or better, you're going to make it. Having a better allocated portfolio, a little bit better mix of stocks so that you can get the equity, the return, and a little bit better mix of the bonds so you get some of that stability. It helps improve that number. But it only helps improve that number when you're still pulling about 3%. The moment
So can I clarify that real quick? Because I just want to make sure that I understood what you're saying.
Yeah, sure.
So what I heard was if you diversify the portfolio, the likelihood that you will get successfully through retirement at a 3% spend rate goes up.
Correct.
But if you want to stay above that 90% threshold, you still can't spend more than 3.
Right. So once you get to 4, once you get the full percentage rate, so it's 25% more income if you think about it, or 30%, you're starting to get into, now you're in the mid 80s, mid to low 80s as far as your likelihood of making it all the way through.
So
and one of the
do that.
Yeah, well, you can, but I'm going to use your story. I'm going to use your story that you use 1,000 times a day, right? Maybe 1,000, maybe 2. Is if I'm trying to go pass a test, right? The old joke in the industry is, what do you call the guy that finishes last in medical school? You call him or her doctor, right? They just needed a 70 to get out, right? But if I'm on an airplane and we're about to take off and the pilot comes on and he's giving you the whole story about, we're going to go to this altitude and turn left at Milwaukee and take a ride in Chicago. And like, you don't care, just show her up where it says on the ticket. And he says, and oh, by the way, we did a fuel Monte Carlo. They would never say that because who the heck knows what a fuel Monte Carlo is, but they say it.
Right.
And they said, we did the math and we've got an 85% chance of making it from New York to LA. Everyone's off the plane, even if the drinks are free, right?
Right.
Because you do really simple math in your head and you go, you know what? If I died in Ohio or Nevada, I don't really care. If I didn't make it all the way through, it was a really, really crappy trip.
Right. Well, and I think about this, it's one thing when you start thinking about math and statistics, right? If you put me at a table in Vegas and you tell me that I've got 80% odds of winning, I am feeling really, really good.
Yeah, no doubt.
That, right. But if you tell me to book a flight on an airline that crashes 20% of the planes that take off, there is no amount of Valium or Xanax that is going to make me stay on that plane and hope that it goes through. Right. And so, I just think about that. And it's so easy, I think, to disconnect from the emotion when you're looking at math. Right. That's part of the reason that I love this job, is that there is no emotion in spreadsheets. Right. Like, it's very simple, very easy.
Amen.
Right. But there's plenty of emotion in all of the conversations that we have about money. And I think that you have to connect to the consequences of an action in order to understand how that really impacts you. So just at a really high level, I want to summarize what we've talked about today. Because we don't know what sequence of return our clients are going to get in retirement. I wish I had a crystal ball that would predict that. It would certainly make our job a lot easier, but we don't. And we don't know what's going to happen 10, 20, 30 years into the market. We have to look at a situation where those returns are randomized in order to figure out what a safe withdrawal rate is. And so looking at the data and looking at really industry accepted ideals right now for a normal duration retirement, if you're looking not just at life expectancy, but at life potential, because at least half the population lives beyond life expectancy, right? That's an average. Some live shorter, some live longer.
Right.
The only ethical way that we can build a plan is to make the assumption that someone lives for a long time. And the longer the period of time that we're looking at, the higher the likelihood that there could be an adverse sequence sometime in there. And so knowing that, the industry accepted rule is that you can spend about 3% of your total asset base. So just to do the easy math real quick, if you have $1 million sitting in your 401k, that means that you can spend roughly $30,000 every year, and you can keep pace with inflation. And there is a better than 90% chance that you will make it through retirement. But when I hear things like that, clients who are like, woo, I'm going to have $1 million or $2 million, all of a sudden get really deflated, because if they have $1 million, they probably weren't living on $30,000 of salary a year. Right. And for people that we talk to that don't have $1 million, reality feels very different. And so I think this conversation in some ways feels a little depressing, but I also think that it's important that we really connect to the reality of a situation so that we can figure out how to make changes in our plan that have a dramatic impact on our life and our lifestyle. So do you want to tee up what we're going to cover in the next couple of podcasts so that we can leave our audience not just depressed, but maybe with a little bit of hope?
Right. Yeah. Someone once told me, and I think it may have been you, that no one remembers what you say, they remember how you made them feel. So I feel like about halfway through all of our client meetings, they're looking for a sharp object just to jab in their neck and like, we're out, we're done. But, the fun part of it is, that, to your point, like, we have to paint the reality as it is, right? There's no sense in sugarcoating it. Here's the reality of what's going on. But what we'll talk about in the next few podcasts are, most of the people I know that can save enough to get to $1 million or get to 2 million, to your point, aren't living on 30K or 60K, right? That's not their lifestyle. So most of the people that I've met that are in that space that are able to go save that kind of money really need somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 to 10 to 11% pull rates in order to have kind of a similar lifestyle from what they're used to living on, somewhere between 5 and 10.
And what happens on the Monte Carlo simulations when you do that?
It's
horrible. Just that chuckle, I think, was enough. It's ugly. It gets ugly.
Yeah, it's ugly.
But there are ways to do that, and there are ways to do that safely. It just requires a little bit of preparation in advance of retirement. And so what we want to talk about over the next couple of podcasts, we want to give you some concrete ways that you can potentially make an impact on what you're able to spend. So we'll give a couple of concrete examples that could dramatically change what someone can safely spend through retirement.
Right. And a lot of it, I think the fun part for me, as we close it out, is it's not even really that difficult. It's just having a slight mind shift change in how you think about money. And once you do that and you know kind of the tools to put in place, it's kind of magical how the problems start to solve themselves. It's just thinking about the flow in a more economic way, which makes it fun.
This is one of the places where I just absolutely love working with you, because your background is in engineering, right? And so you're looking for, and what I've noticed over all the years that we've worked together, I won't say how many because it makes me feel old. But when I think about the beauty of kind of the plans that we build, is that the focus is frequently about efficiency. It's not about taking more risk. It's not about, shooting for some crazy rate of return. It's just about building a plan where we use the dollars more efficiently so that the output is impacted by that. And so we'll get into the details next time.
It'll be fun.
You'll join us, because there are ways that you can change what you get to spend in retirement, even if you aren't changing how much you're saving today.
That's right. Yeah, it'll be fun. Well, thanks, and look forward to next week.